Hello and welcome everyone to another Procreate for Beginners video. This video is part of a series in case you don't already know that. I have a playlist on my channel called Procreate and Digital Art, and I'll link it right here and also in the description. That is where you can go to see all of these videos. Now I've made a few before this, including one big intro video first, and then a few deep dives into different topics in the Procreate app. And this deep dive we're going to go into today is all about adding text to your art and all the different things you can do with the text. So let's get started. Alright, so I just opened a regular screen size document in Procreate, nothing fancy. In order to add text, you're going to go to the wrench, which is the actions menu or settings, and go under add, make sure add is on, and then go to add text. And it's going to add automatically the word text in a certain font, one of the fonts that Procreate has automatically, and it'll use whatever color you have selected in your color drop. So usually it will come up with this keyboard, or like a bigger one sometimes. I don't know the difference, why it does the mini one sometimes. But if it doesn't, it'll come up with this menu down here, and you can just hit the keyboard and it'll turn it on. You can also hide the keyboard, show keyboard. You can then, put whatever text you want to put in rather than the word text. For this purpose, I'm just going to do something because spring is around the corner. Actually, it's already here technically. And I'm going to be doing some spring related projects, so it's kind of on my mind. So I'm just going to write spring. And then I'm going to do another line and say flowers. And we're going to talk about different things that we can do with this text. So then when you're done, you can just click outside of this text and sort of deselect it. And then once you click on it again, it'll come up with this menu. You have to kind of double click. And, all these things are kind of shortcuts to the things that you can do in the message, in the, I don't know what it's called, the text settings. So first you want to select all, because that'll select your text. And then if you click the font here, sometimes it doesn't actually select it for some reason. I don't know why. Okay, so we're going to select all. And then if you click the font name here, that's what that INA 01 is. Click that. I don't know why it didn't actually select my text. It bothers me. Okay, now it's working. So you can tell it's selected by it being highlighted in blue. And you can move these nodes to whatever you want to select. If you want to only do part of the word or part of the selection, part of the phrase that you have on here in its own box, you can move these and only do like part of the word if you want, or you can select all. So right now we have everything selected. This over here again is the INA 01, is the font that automatically shows up every time. That's one of the Procreate fonts. There's 3 of them that Procreate has on its own. And I can show you the other ones they have for Procreate is just the Impact down here and the Jack Armstrong BB. Those are all the Procreate fonts. The rest of these are iOS fonts that you can find on your iOS system. So I'm just going to leave it on the default one for now. You can also change the style of the font. We are going to get into changing all these things in a minute. I'm just going to kind of go an overview here. The size, will change the size. And you can also click on this little rectangle to input, a number that you want if you have a certain one. And you can do the same with all of these other things too, like the percentages and the things down here. So kerning is, the whole thing is selected right now, so it's going to show you the exact same thing for kerning and tracking basically. But that is the space in between the letters. And kerning you can actually do just between two letters. rather than the entire thing. Tracking is for the entire thing. And I'm going to get into that a little further later on in the video. Leading is, it's going to change the space in between two different lines of text, basically. So lines, like horizontal lines of text. And then baseline is going to change the baseline of all of your lines of text, basically. So baseline is kind of like where the line is that you would write your text on top of. If you increase it a lot, it'll give you a bunch of space in between the baseline and your text. And decreasing it, interesting. It goes completely the opposite way. That's probably because your baseline is going above instead of below. See how the bottom of that bounding box is going further down, and this time the upper part is going further up, and you're stretching it that way. We'll talk about that when we get there, just to kind of show you what it is though. And then the opacity will change the opacity of your text, the color, and you can change it that way. So that's that. Then over in attributes here, this is the alignment. So all these 4 buttons here, so it automatically goes to center. But you can do left aligned, center, right aligned, or justified, which is kind of like a paragraph. So if you were to hit, if you're writing sentences, it would be like paragraph form rather than, it's a little different than left aligned. Left aligned is like every thing starts at the left. But this is like if you were to write a whole sentence, it would start at the next left kind of thing. That's the difference. So I'm going to put it back on center, which is the default. Now these next things are underline, which you can do to your text. You can outline, or you can make it vertical. That's what that is. And you can do some of these things together, all 3 of them, if you want, or just 2 of them. You don't have to just pick one, you can do all of those. And then this last thing here is the TT, is showing you that it would make everything capitalized if you turned it on. And then if you click it off, it will make it lowercase. And the thing to notice here is that originally the S and the F, spring flowers, was capitalized, and then when I turned the capitalization off, it went back to lowercase. It didn't go back to what I originally set. So you're going to have to redo that if you decide you don't want to do it. Just, a tip. So it's not something that's remembered on Procreate, unfortunately. Not a setting that's remembered. But anyway, so that is what all those do. Okay, so another thing, let me get out of here. I'm going to hit done. We'll come back to that in a minute. If you click on your text, it'll show you the bounding box around it. So you can move these nodes around to make the bounding box bigger, which is going to affect like when we talked about your alignment with your text. If you wanted it all the way to the right, you could make it all the way to the right and then move this over if you want it all the way right on the canvas, kind of thing. But that's just for your bounding box, but you can also move this around on your canvas. So if you wanted it up here, you could put it here, or here, 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 whatever, just by holding it and dragging it around, and then let go, and it'll be wherever you let go. And just to show you, again, if you are clicking this and making this smaller, if you make it too small, it's going to, compress your text into more lines. You can change this with your size of your text if you want later on, but just to show you what happens if you make it too small. Okay, going back to this now, I have everything deselected. I just clicked off the screen so that the bounding box disappeared. To get that back, you would click on your text once. That'll bring your bounding box back, and again, that will bring your keyboard up if you have it selected. You can hide it as well, like I said before. But in order to select your text and get it back into the edit text menu, you have to double click your text, and obviously I clicked the bottom there, the flowers. You can move this and select the whole thing. It's kind of hard to see because it's behind there, but if you can see, the spring is also selected now. And it'll bring up again this little mini menu that has a couple quick things you can do if that's all you wanted to do. But if you want to change a lot of stuff, you can go back into the edit text style menu, I believe it's called. And again, you can change all this stuff now that everything will be selected on your text if you double click it and then you move the nodes over. Again, you can change the font. So let's just go through a few here. And if you notice, some of the fonts have more of these styles available than others. So the one it starts with, the Ina 01, has probably the most. And this is, again, one of the Procreate fonts, so that makes sense. But you won't be able to get like all of these styles with every font. It depends on what the font has when it was designed. So, or the version you have of the font. Sometimes the free version only has a certain, amount, and then if you pay for it, you get more. But just to illustrate, some of these have more style options than others. And again, as long as this is selected, you can preview all these changes, before committing to them with the done button. So you can always go back to what you had before. Oh, never mind, I don't want to change that. I'm going to leave it the way it is. Because you haven't committed to anything yet by hitting done. Otherwise, you'd have to come back in here and just go back to what you had and then click done. But again, a lot of this stuff has to do with what you have selected on here. So everything is selected again, so you would change the size here. But if you only selected spring, you would make spring bigger and flowers would stay the same. I don't remember exactly where that was, but that's fine. Now, if you wanted to do kerning, if you select just 2 letters there, well, now it's selected 3, but that's fine. But you could do only 2. But you see how it's only changing those 3 letters? And you can also do that even if this wasn't selected by clicking in between 2 letters where the cursor is in between 2 letters, going back into here and then changing it that way. Because kerning is meant for basically in between two letters only, not for the entire word. And again, you can either do the cursor in between the 2 letters or you can select those 2 letters. So let's select this again, go back in. So that was kerning. And the reason you want to do something like that is, I don't really have a good example of this to show you right now, but sometimes, depending on the font you're using, there may be like weird spaces in between 2 letters for some reason. For example, like the capital A and the capital V next to each other, they kind of go together. If you can see my pencil, like the leg of the A on this side kind of goes into the space of the next letter, like the V, and then the V kind of goes in the space of the A. And that's with most fonts have that automatically kerned, where they kind of go to, because they kind of fit together. Like there's this big space in between it otherwise. They kind of fit together better. So again, most fonts take care of that when they're being developed. But in case you have one that doesn't, you might end up with a weird space in between the A and the V if you're doing capital A and V. And there's other options too, not just the A and the V. But if there's ever like a weird space in between 2 letters for some reason, where it looks kind of weird, that's where you could change this, where you would go in between the A and the V, or whatever letters, and use the kerning feature to make just those 2 letters kind of move closer together, because there's this weird space that you want to get rid of. That's why you would use that feature. So Again, I don't have like a good example of this like set up right now to show you that, but that is why you would use the kerning feature. And then tracking is, I mean, you could do this with the kerning, like I said before. Like it's basically if you have the whole thing selected. Ooh, the F and the L aren't doing it though. That's interesting. That is interesting. It must be with this font. It must be like I forget what that's called. Like where the F and the L are kind of connected in the font. So like if you were to write an F and an L next to each other, they kind of become their own thing rather than individual letters. That depends on the way the font is developed as well, designed. So that's probably why that's doing it there. And you would have to, if you wanted to do this, you would have to go in and put your cursor in between the F and the L and do a kerning. But if I make it bigger, I bet you it won't do it, see? Because the capital F and the L aren't together. That's probably what's going on there. I wonder if I can pick a different font and it won't do it. Here, see, like the DIN condensed doesn't do it. Anyway, if you ever run into that, now you know what that is. So that's what those things are. Now the leading and the baseline are, we kind of looked at that, but basically kind of with the kerning, if you put this after the first word there, the first line, and go into here, you could change, you know, just that space in between those two lines, basically. And I'd have to kind of illustrate this with more lines. Maybe I'll write something. Let's do that. So let me go and write, I don't know, some spring flowers. And then if we go at the end of this line and go in here and do the leading, it's only going to move flowers down rather than all of them. And right now it's not selected, so it probably won't do anything here. Yeah. So we got to select the text, select all, and then go, if you do the baseline here, it's going to move all of them in between the lines rather than just the two. And again, if you move this backwards, it's going to move the baseline to be above the words rather than below. It's invisible, so you can't see it, but that's what's going on there. And again, I went over the opacity and all of these. So that is what those do. So I'm just going to hit done here, and I'm going to get rid of some, because that was just to illustrate that. Okay, I've deselected everything by clicking off the bounding box. So if this is part of a big art project you're doing, you probably want to do different things to it. So I have to explain again. I explained this a bit in my intro video. Right now, the text is, because normally fonts and text are vector rather than raster, and Procreate is a raster program. So it lets you do this vectorizing kind of thing with the text to a certain extent on the program, but to do certain things to the text, you're going to have to rasterize it, if that makes sense. All right, so let me just show you. If you go into the layers menu, when you add text, it'll add a new layer, because again, normally when you open a document, it has this background color and then a layer 1. I just added text on top of that, so it'll add another layer on top, no matter what you have on your layers. That will have your text, and it just comes up with whatever you named your text here, spring. So if you go into layer options menu from here, you see the option to rasterize. I'm not going to do that yet, but that's what you would do in order to start using it as like its own layer that's rasterized, and you can do the same things you do to other layers, basically. But you can't undo, or you can undo it, but once you start doing stuff to it, You're not going to be able to undo it. So I suggest when you have this layer here that you duplicate it and keep a copy of your text the way it is in case you want to change things. Because once you rasterize it, you're not going to be able to change all those things that I just showed you, like the capitalization and the alignment and the font choice and the kerning and stuff like that. You're not going to be able to change any of that once you rasterize it. So you want to keep a copy of this in case you want to change things. So always duplicate your text before you rasterize. There are a few more things you can do with the vector version of the text. And you can do some of these things on raster as well. So you can do them on vector and raster, basically, these things. So again, when you move your text around, you can do that whether it's a raster or a vector. You can also, with this text, let's do something here though. Let's make this, select all, go into the font. Let's make this bold, let's make it bigger so I can illustrate this next thing. I'm going to hit done, and then I'm just going to move this up. Alright, so if you remember in my masks video, and if you haven't seen that, go ahead and go watch it. I'm going to kind of go over it again real quickly here. But if you make another layer on top of here, and you, again, it depends on what you want to do. These are my, I'm just going to pick a painting brush. Just, it doesn't really matter which one I use. I'm going to pick a different color though. Let's do pink. Again, I'm doing this on the layer that's above that text. And what I'm going to do is do a clipping mask on that layer. So what it did was it brought that pink color into that text. You can do that when the text is vector still, or when it's already rasterized. You can do both. So, and then you would be able to kind of change your text again with that clipping mask on. Well, I didn't have it selected, that's why. So again, I have the thing selected now, going into here. Now I can change this again, make it bigger and smaller. Still, even though if it was rasterized, I wouldn't be able to do this. So maybe I want to make it italic, let's say. But it's still got that clipping mask on from the layer that's above. But if I wanted to maybe move this, you see if I move this up, it's going to get out of where that pink was drawn with that clipping mask on. You know, you can do that if you want. I know this is kind of confusing, especially if you have no idea what these things are. We're going to do projects again later that will explain this better. But I'm just showing you that you can do this when it's still a vector. You can do a clipping mask and a layer mask, actually. And you can also, let's take this clipping mask off. You can also, this was in the layers video if you don't know what I'm talking about, but you have this layer selected here, dragging this to the right, selects that layer as well. You can group it, even though it's not rasterized. And you'd be able to change your text still if you wanted to. So you'd be able to change whatever you want to change. Even though like it's still vector, it's not rasterized, and it's still part of that group. You can still change that because you haven't rasterized it yet. So also, just to show you, if you notice when you insert text, it comes up with like A in the thumbnail. It doesn't show you the actual thumbnail. That's because that's what happens when it's still vector. So just to show you, I'm gonna rasterize this for the layers option menu. Again, you click on it and this will come up, rasterize. You see that it actually turned into the actual text now, right? Like on the thumbnail. And I'm actually going to move this group out. That was just to show you could group it, and I don't need this anymore either, so I'm going to take that off for now. But anyway, so now this text is rasterized, but you can't edit it anymore. Right now I'm painting with my finger because you can't click on it and edit it anymore. So that's why, again, if you aren't sure if you're done making all your changes to text, you'll want to make a duplicate copy. So I still have that. Obviously it looks different because I did more stuff to it afterwards. But you could always go back here and change something else if you wanted to. You would still have the ability to do that because it's not rasterized. So this will become more apparent when we do more projects later. I'll show you things you can do more with rasterized text rather than leaving it vectorized. So you can import fonts. There's a couple different ways you can import fonts. So you can, from this menu, again, if you double click, go into your font here, you see that there's import font here. You can click that. And then if I had a font here from my iCloud drive on my account here, I would be able to click on it, import it. I don't have that yet. I'll probably just get one to illustrate this, but that's one. I just want to show you that's one of the options, the way you can import a font. You can also go into your files. So I'm just going to show you, I have that right here. Again, I have nothing on here, but that kind of brought up the same thing. And then you would drag and drop your font file into your Procreate folder on your iPad, which is on my iPad, Procreate, and then you see fonts here. I have 0 because I didn't import any. But what you would do is, you could drag your file over to that and put it in there just like that, rather than importing it that way. And if you wanted to delete a font from Procreate that you didn't want in there anymore, you could just go to this folder, and they would be in here, and you could delete it right from the folder, and that would just delete it right away. So that's what that is on my iPad Procreate. So you can do that. You can also, this is a little easier if you have like an iOS device, like a computer, like either a MacBook or an iMac or whatever. If you have a font on that computer, you would be able to either airdrop it, which would be the easiest way if you have an iOS device. You can airdrop it from your computer to your iPad, and then you would save it in your files, and then you would import it that way. But if you don't have a computer like that, you would either have to download the font wherever you downloaded it from begin with directly onto your iPad, and it would show up in your files then wherever you save it, and then you would have to import it then that way again. Or old school ways, you can email it to yourself. If you're trying to upload a font from, if you're trying to upload a font from a Windows computer, you would have to either email it to yourself or somehow get that file onto your iPad. If there's another way to do that with a Windows computer, it's a lot easier with AirDrop with a Mac computer. Or again, you would have to actually go and find, it would depend on where you downloaded that font from. Let's say you bought one from someone on Etsy and you're able to use it on several devices. Make sure you check. You would have to go to that website, wherever it is, and download it again onto your iPad first, and then upload it onto your Procreate fonts, using one of the you would upload it again onto your Procreate set of fonts using one of the methods I just showed you. So you would take it from your iCloud drive or wherever you saved it on your iPad, or it could be on your iPad if you have it saved there, and just drag it in to your Procreate fonts folder. Or, again, going back into Procreate, you could just use that import font option here, and it would come up with, again, either if you had it saved on your iPad or your iCloud drive, you could just click it. The only thing is you have to make sure that if it's a zipped file, you have to make sure it's unzipped before you do that, because you're not going to be able to do that directly from this option. So you have to unzip it first, and then you'd be able to do it. But that is basically it. Now, if you want me to show you that, I can quickly just download a free font. I'm going to use my computer. Unzip the file. Now I'm going to just airdrop it from my computer. I know you can't see what I'm doing because I'm not filming that part right now, but I'm going to airdrop the font I just downloaded to my iPad. When it comes up, there it is. Now you see it came up with this. I'm going to say open with files. So then I can decide where I want to actually have this. I'm going to put it on my iPad actually. And I'm just going to save it. So now show you how to do that again. Let's get out of here. I mean, I could have stayed there, I guess. All right, import font. I put it on my iPad. It's this one. I just clicked on the file, and now it should be in here. That was called Lombardia script. There it is. And I don't have it selected, so it's not going to show up. Let me go back. There. That's the font I just downloaded right there. So that was how you would do that. And again, I have a Mac, so if I had a Windows, I'd have to like find some way to get the file onto my iPad. Again, probably emailing yourself is the best way, or like a Dropbox or something like that. Google Drive, whatever. So that's how to do that, and you could do it the other way as well if you want me to show you that real quick. I'm going to go into my Procreate fonts. I'm going to delete this. Oops, I didn't mean to do that. Going to go in here, and I'm going to just delete this out of here. So now I'll just show you, before I do anything else, going back into Procreate, missing font. So it turned it back because I deleted it out of there. So the other way to do it was the drag and drop thing. So you can go into Files. I'm in Procreate right now. Go to on my iPad, that's where that is. Pick this up. Go back here, back in here. You just kind of have to wait for everything to open. And there you go. So then it should be there again now. Oh, well, it's already, it remembered that I wanted it at that, so, but it should be already in there. There you go. So that's how you do that. I will show you more as we do more projects and things like that. Things that you can do, you know, more with fonts, especially with the selections and transformations. In fact, when I get to those videos, which I think is next, I will do a text related thing to kind of show you, kind of combining the text stuff with the selections and transformations. That's something we can use. So I will show you that in, I think, the next video. But for this video, that's it. Okay, just to show you what you have to look forward to coming up on this channel, and depending on when you're watching this, these videos may already be done. But if you're watching this as it's coming out, these videos are coming soon. So if you have been watching these videos so far, You'll notice a little bit of a change that I made to this screen. I did decide to do selections and transformations on different videos, and those are probably the next ones we're going to be doing. They go together, but they're also separate things. So selections we'll do first, and then when I do transformations, we're going to kind of revisit some of the selection stuff, because basically you have to select something before you can transform it. So there'll be a little bit of a review of selections when we do transformations. But other than that, again, we're going to go over the brush library. So every brush that Procreate has preloaded onto the software, I'm going to kind of go over like the properties of that brush to some extent, show you some of the differences and what kind of brush it is and what you can do with it, kind of thing. So we'll go over those. And then after we do that, we're going to do the brush studio, which we've already taken a look at in the brush video. We took a look at the brush library in that video as well. But we're going to go into every sort of subcategory there is in there, and I'm going to show you what each of those subcategories, the little things that you can change, what each of them do to create a different type of brush. So we'll go over that, and then after we're done with that, we're going to do a couple brushes together that we make. So, a couple simple ones to give you a little jumping off point to what kind of brushes you could make on your own if you want to. So we'll do a few of those, and then we're going to talk about the adjustments menu, and we're going to talk about animations as well in Procreate. And once we do the deep dive on animations video, after that we're going to do a few animations together as well to show you what you can do with the animations, a few examples. And then the etc., again, if you haven't already watched one of these videos, is kind of like the background stuff that you need to know and sort of miscellaneous topics that I couldn't fit in any other category. So that'll probably be the last deep dive I do. And then once all these deep dives are done, we're going to be doing some projects together on my channel that you can follow along with, that will take some of these concepts together rather than separately, because we've been doing them separately. So it will give you an idea of what type of things you can do with Procreate, and that'll be kind of your jumping off point to make your own art. So that will be coming soon. Trying to get through these deep dives as fast as I can. And that's about it for this video, so I will see you in the next one.